your chapter 10 or your behavioral objectives. So what is behavioral objectives pa muna? So let's define this first. Okay, definition of terms is of course you have the goals, the final outcome of what is achieved at the end of the teaching, learning process. Objective, a behavior describing the performance that learners should be able to exhibit to be considered competent. Okay, so yung sinasabi na, um, ano nga ba yung dapat na makita sa isang learner or dun sa isang aspiring future nurse or staff nurse or future nurse as an educator? Okay. So, part of the teaching and learning process para natin ma-achieve or makuha or makamit natin kung ano yung nais natin na matutunan sa isang specialization or part ng nursing. Yan. And of course, considering your performance and kung paano kayo mag-perform as a student sa loob ng classroom and also with the guidance of your clinical instructors at the hospital side. Okay, so magkaiba kasi ang assessment sa hospital side and sa assessment ng nasa clinical area or nasa academic side or nasa school. Okay? So, ano man pinagkakaiba niyan? So, pagka kasi nasa school kayo or sa academic side kayo, more on sa theoretical. What do I mean by more on sa theoretical? You are gaining basic knowledge on how are you going to um, learn the different functions of the human body and different diseases that may affect the functioning or the daily living of a single person na from the youngest up to the oldest. And pagka ba nasa hospital sila, ano ba yung mga dapat natin na i-assess sa mga pasyente natin from the youngest to the oldest? Okay, so from the theoretical side, you are being taught of what is proper and what is what are the basics of being a nurse, from anatomy and physiology, theoretical foundations of nursing, down to maternal and child. You have your psychiatric, then followed by your medical surgical nursing, which involves all the majority of the organs. And how are you going to do your independent nursing, dependent, and your collaborative nursing management? Okay, so of course, there's a certain behavior or a sense of professionalism that is being looked or being honed or being molded to you by your clinical instructors and professors. Okay, so types of objectives, you have your educational or instructional objectives, content-oriented, teacher or centered outcomes of the education process in reference to an aspect of a program or a total program of study. Um, in the master's area, when it comes to educational instructional objectives, nurse educators tend to focus on curriculum development. Ano nga ba yung mga dapat nakapaloob sa course ng nursing? Kailangan ba na magdagdag pa ng major subjects or other fields that may cover other rising needs of the future nurse profession in the future or what is happening right now. Okay? So ano ba yung mga dapat pa ma-develop? Diba? Or ano pa yung mga dapat na maging specialization ba ng isang nurse? Though nurses are generalist, meaning we are a bit of everything, a bit of a doctor, a bit of a pharmacist, a bit of a nutritionist, a bit of medical technologist, a bit of a physical therapist. So nandun ang lahat. No, we are molded into one. And also, there is the aspect or there's the what you call the educator aspect of being a nurse. Okay. So going back to the educational instructional objectives, pagka dito sa instructional objectives, like what it said here in the slide, this is teacher-centered. No? Sa akin, tinitingnan yung mga outcomes or i-evaluate or probably an evidence-based practice study. Ano yung mga ginagawa ba ng mga professors in the area or ng mga nurse educators? Ano ba yung mga dapat nilang ituro? Diba? And pagka sinabi din content-oriented, going back, no, pagka content-oriented, this focuses on what the subject is supposed to be uh, uh, is about. Ano na nga ba yung mga dapat matutunan ng mga future nurses natin? No? Hindi tayo nagfo-focus dun sa ibang mga fields, but we tend to focus on the content of what is to be taught for the future of the nursing profession or the other professions as well. So iba-iba yan, hindi pare-pareho. Okay? Process in reference, program, ano ba yung mga dapat na ma-develop ng mga program for the uh, improvement of the nursing profession. And in totality, as a whole, ano ba yung pinaka-main objective ng program na yon, uh, na magbe-benefit not just the teacher but also the students. Then you have your behavioral or your learning objectives, action-oriented, learner-centered outcomes of the teaching or learning process. So, if we are going to look at this in the perspective of the nurse educator, so going back to the educational instructional objectives and learning objectives, no? Ano ba yung mga pinagkaiba nila? Okay? So, what's the key difference between the two? So, the key difference between the two is that in the instructional objectives and learning objectives is that instructional objectives describe what is exactly to be learned by the learners, whereas learning objectives describe what learners know and what the learners are capable of doing at the end of the course. Okay? So, as at the start of this course, ano yung mga na-expect ninyo na matutunan? Diba? Ano nga ba yung content ng health education? Health education nga ba is all about just patient teaching? Diba? Nandito rin yung sa you also will also gain the knowledge on how are you going to handle students in the future if you decide to become if you decide if ever you decide to become a college professor or an instructor. Okay, so also learning goals and objectives that generally describe what an instructor, program, or institution aims to do, whereas a learning outcome describes in observable and measurable terms what a student is able to do as a result of completing a learning experience. Now, this might be a course, a project, or a unit test or a quiz. Yan. Okay. So, yun yun sa learning goals and general objectives. Ng pareho na yan. And of course, um, aside from those knowledge that you are going to gain or learn in this particular course, you will also learn the necessary skills, or you will be equipped with the basic skills to for you to be able to push through with your nursing profession. So difference between goals and objectives, pagka sabi ng goals and objectives, we say global, this is global, ibig sabihin in general, while the objectives is specific. Specific, you have goals, you have your broad, then objectives, you have your singular, long term and short term, and multidimensional and unidimensional. Okay, so this is similar with the goals and objectives of the single institution. No? Okay. So responsibility for establishing goals and objectives. Setting of goals and objectives must be a mutual decision-making process between the teacher and the learner. Both parties must buy into and participate in establishing predetermined objectives and goals prior to initiating the teaching or learning process. Blending what the learner wants to learn and what the teacher has assessed the learner needs to know provides for a mutually accountable, respectful, and fulfilling educational experience. Okay. So, yun nga, setting goals, what you need to learn in the health education subject, particularly on how are you going to teach your patients in the future, providing health teachings, and how are you going to handle certain situations, um, knowledge in terms of um, the different institutions that were involved or that, in the past in the developing of the nursing profession. Okay. So the debate about using behavioral objectives, arguments against superfluous, are reductionistic, time-consuming, pedagogic, stifles creativity, interferes with freedom to learn, and impossible to be inclusive. Okay, so these are the debates that being used to behavioral objectives. So ano nga ba yung una? Okay, pagka sinabi din superfluous. So as defined in the dictionary, superfluous is being defined as unnecessary, especially through being more than enough. No, hindi na siya kailangan or non-essential. Yan. Pag sinabi natin reductionistic, pagka naman ng reductionistic, this is any of the several related philosophical ideas regarding the associations between phenomena which can be described in terms of other simpler or more fundamental phenomena. It is also described as an intellectual and philosophical position that interprets a complex system as the sum of its parts. Okay. So, reductionism is an approach that is used in many disciplines, including psychology, that is centered on the belief that we can best explain something by breaking it down into its individual parts. So, just like the subject that you have right now, yung health education, hinihimay-himay natin siya kung ano nga ba yung mga content ng health education that you can use in your future or for your future. So, um, okay, so next is your time consuming. So masyadong malaki yung ginugugol na oras or that we are spending with about the behavioral objectives. No, and sometimes uh, it becomes a debate or nagkakaroon ng pagtatalo. Ayan nga, sabi nga dito. Kasi um, there are many things that should be considered. Okay? And pedagogic is when you say pedagogic, it is related generally in teaching and something to do with education, of course. So pedagogical or relating to or befitting in teacher or education. No? For example, new teachers will be evaluated on pedagogical skills such as lesson planning and classroom management. So sa nursing, though we as professional nurses might have not, or some of us might have not taken the licensure exam for teachers, which is some of us do took that exams where they are licensed teacher. Now, they have to take particular or a certain number of units for them to be able to take the licensure exam for teachers and become licensed teachers. Okay, so primarily, nurses have or has this instinct that they can also teach because of the way they handle certain situations and the patients and people they are interacting to inside the hospital. Okay, so even if we, as a nurse, we don't have that specific, what you call this, course or profession or preparation for being a teacher, we tend to adapt and we tend to deliver what is necessary for the students to learn. So sometimes, or it becomes an instinct to some of us to teach. So hindi lang po kasi pagiging nurse or pagtuturo lang sa pasyente ang kayang gawin ng isang nurse. So if they say it's pedagogical or in relation to teaching, of course, nurses has the capacity to teach. Yun nga lang, professional subjects, of course, we are not allowed to. Or if you are a licensed teacher, if you took the LET exam or the licensure exam for teachers, then you are qualified. You are probably might be qualified to teach a certain subject in the lower year. No, yun nga lang kasi there's a specific major kasi when it comes to being a teacher. No, hindi lang teacher na basta na lang graduate ng bachelor's degree of becoming an elementary teacher, but they also have a specific subject to specialize. Okay? Not just elementary teachers or high school teachers. Secondary education, it could be Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education, major in, they have this, their particular major. They have their own certain path. And like to us nurses, we have a certain path, but we can teach professional courses even if we do not take the licensure exam for teachers. But kung gusto nyo tumaas ang sweldo, of course, you're going to do what it takes for you to have an increase in your salary. Take the licensure exam for teachers. But before you can do that, you have to take some units in the nurse or in the course of education. So, of course, stifles creativity. What do you mean by stifle? So, when you say stifle, this is another word for restraining or paghadlang sa isang tao or sa individual or certain group. A stifle means restriction. Uh, okay, so behavioral objectives might restrict creativity. Okay, so na mangyayari pagka ganyan. You tend to focus more on the academe or focus on certain things instead of exploring and learning other things, especially in what involves with creativity ba? Arts, music, um, poetry, uh, journalism or story writing. Yan. So, maaaring makahadlang siya and interferes with freedom to learn. No? Nakakahadlang siya sa kalayaan ng isang tao para matuto. Okay? So the debate using behavioral objectives again, so those are some of the things that might be questionable or arguments against your behavioral objectives. Then followed by impossible to be inclusive. No? Pagka sa inclusive, yung isasama natin yung iba. No? If, wala tayong iiwanan ng kahit na sino. Okay, so also keeps the teaching learner centered. Okay, so hindi po ang mga teacher ang magbe-benefit ng pagka nagtuturo ng isang professor, isang teacher. But it aims to focus on the learner to learn things that are certain or vital with their future. And next is communicates plan to others. No? You're able to share your idea. Hindi ka natatakot na i-share your idea mo. And you tend to speak your mind. Of course, when you speak your mind, when you want to be heard, you have to, uh, what do you call this? You have to show respect. So also helps learners to stay on track. I know it's impossible for you, for all of you to stay on track. Particularly, we are still are in a pandemic situation. Though some experts might say that this situation uh, might lead us or sooner or later might lead us back to the normal. But if you're watching this, there are still certain things that might hinder to going back to normal. So part of helps the learners to stay on track. So paano nga ba makaka-stay din kayo or dito, ma to what you call this, magstay kayo or pipirmi kayo dun sa isang bagay na dapat ninyong matutunan. No? You have to have self-discipline and self-regulation. You have to be able to manage your time in learning. Hindi po pwede kasi na, si sir kasi or si ma'am, hindi naman nagturo yan. Hindi naman nagtuturo, puro video na lang or what. Hindi kasi po pwede na lahat ibibigay sa inyo. You also have to find a way for you to learn. Maaring yung teaching way or teaching method na ginagawa ko might be effective to some of you, but the others it might not be effective. So you have to, if it's not effective to you, that particular teaching style, no, you have to find a way for you to be able to cope up with what's lacking. Hindi kasi po pwede na idadahilan na lang ninyo palagi na ganito ganyan. Eh, paano kung napoprovide naman pala yung mga, sorry, napoprovide yung mga necessary lectures or mga vital lectures, but you are having understanding your the lesson. You can communicate with your teacher or your professor if he or she is to reply, and what you're going to do. Of course, um, you can do the necessary thing or take action of it. Kung lalo na kung napapabayaan ka. Okay, so I think on my part naman, uh, we are trying to or still delivering my best to teach all of you. So yan. So also, organizes educational approach. Kasama dun yan sa ginagawa ng isang professor or isang teacher para matuto yung kanyang mga estudyante. So, hindi kasi po pwede na magulo or walang sistema yung pag-deliver ng education. Sa minsan mahirap lang sa part ng mga educator na nakasanayan nila isang teaching method na ginagawa nila na effective doon sa mga estudyante nila or sa ibang estudyante nila. Then, magkakaroon ng request dun sa isa na magkakaroon ng request sa isang estudyante na ganito ganyan or magkaroon pa ng special class when in fact dun sa iba naman hindi na applicable sa kanila kasi natutunan naman nila yung mga kailangan nilang matutunan. Yun nga lang kasi if it's not the problem of the teacher, sometimes you also have as a student or as a learner, you also have to assess yourself, your learning capacity, on what are you going to do for you to be able to catch up with your classmates. Okay? So, hindi na po pwedeng, palagi na lang na, palagi na lang natin na i-assess sa mga teacher. So, same thing with this kind of using of or with the use of your behavioral objectives. Okay? So, continuing, ensures that all process is deliberate. Okay? What do you mean by deliberate? Yung kayang sadyain or gawin. Kayang gawin na ng maayos and ma-deliver ng maayos yung dapat na matutunan. And of course, tailors teaching to learners' needs. Yan. So, majority of the class may be benefiting dun sa way ng method ng pagtuturo ng guro or ng isang professor. But for others, hindi. So, also, that particular educator must also learn how to adjust. So, hindi gano'n kasi pare-pareho yung capacity or hindi gano'n kabilis or hindi gano'n pare-pareho yung kabilis yung pick up sa isang instruction or dun sa isang particular na subject. Okay, and of course, focuses on the attentions of the learner. Yan, sa kaya minsan, pinapa-open ko yung mga camera because we are not on a face-to-face setup. So, iba sa inyo natutulog. Okay? So, of course, what the focus is that you have to be able to deliver what necessary things that the person should learn or your learner should learn in your class. And of course, orients teacher and learner to the outcomes. No, kaya minsan malaki sa mga course syllabus. Objectives and outcomes. And three major advantages of to writing objectives provides basis for selection and design of instructional content, methods, and materials, and provides learner with means to organize efforts toward accomplishing objectives, allows for determination as to the extent that objectives have been accomplished. Okay, so these are the major advantages when it comes to writing objectives. We tend to have a specific topic, no, per topic or a specific topic that we have to discuss in a particular subject or also the methods na meron. Yan. And able to provide the learner with the means of to organize efforts toward accomplishing objectives. Okay? So that's one of the, or that's just one of the few things that the, what do you call this, the educator should provide or should be the content of the objectives. And allow that for determination to extend the objectives have been accomplished. So once accomplished, paano mo malalaman kung accomplished na yan? Of course, with the grades of the student, outstanding to satisfactory grades of the students. So, ibig sabihin na deliver ng maayos yung particular na subject na yun ay matutunan yung learner. So, also writing behavioral objectives, you have your three important characteristics. Okay, so you have number one, performance, describe what the learner is expected to be able to do. And condition describes the situation under which behavior will be observed. Criterion describes how well or with accuracy the learner must be able to perform. So, hindi na tayo siya nalalayo. This is something to do with your nursing skills or your related learning experience in the hospital. Okay? And also the academe, yung mga subjects ninyo, particularly health assessment and the skills within it, yung fundamentals of nursing, yung vital signs taking yan, nakapaloob dyan. And so those are the preparation for you to become a nurse or to become a professional or a registered nurse in the future. And ano nga ba yung mga tinitingnan namin? Describes the situation under which behavior will be observed, particularly in your skills and the clinical side. You have to demonstrate what it takes to become a registered nurse. You are able to apply what you have learned in the school to practice in the hospital, and you are able to perform those skills that you have recited and have done in the front of the class or in the videos. Of course, doon kayo ginigradean kung gaano ka-accurate and kung gaano ka husay kayo dun sa pag-perform ninyo ng mga task. And of course, you have the four-step approach. No, yung four-step approach niya, the link to behavioral objective together, the following three steps are recommended. One, you have identified the testing situation, what's the condition, and the state of the learner and the learner's behavior, the performance. So, condition, the testing situation for the condition. This is something to do with your mental and physical preparedness. Kasama na rin natin emotional. And huwag na rin natin i-neglect yung spiritual. Okay, so also you have to also state the learner and the learner's behavior performance. Ang nga ba yung performance na yun observe namin? Through your other demonstrations and through your examinations. So state the performance level, so the criterion. Pagka sinabing state the performance level, is it outstanding, satisfactory, fair, or bad, or needs to be repeated? And state how well the learner will perform the criterion. So ano nga ba yung mga step-by-step processes and ano nga ba yung mga dapat i-observe namin sa inyo? Were you able to recite things that we expect to hear from you pag kami mga recitation? Were you able to perform the necessary task or necessary procedures during the demonstration or the demonstration? And state how well the learner will perform the criterion. Sasabihin namin sa inyo, mga grades, mga feedbacks namin yan. And the ABCD rule, you have your audience, behavior, condition, under what circumstances, you have your degree, how much, to what extent. Just same thing with your health assessment pa rin. No? Similar lang siya. So, common mistakes when writing objective. Wait. So, paano ba nasabi na similar to? It's with your health assessment. Okay, pagkasama natin audience, you have your instructors and the behavior that you demonstrate to us kung nakakasunod ba kayo sa instructions namin or and other things that we tell you to do or kung ano nasa checklist na ginagawa ninyo. Regardless kung sa condition, of course we have to consider if you have problems in terms of physical condition nyo and of course psychological and emotional. Then we have to address that first before we ask you to do any procedures. Degree on how much or to what extent. na may mga puwedeng mangyari and hanggang saan nga lang ba yung dapat ninyong gawin. So, common mistakes when writing objectives, describing what instructor will do rather than what the learner will do. So, hindi po dapat ang instructor ang ine-expect na gumawa ng mga